Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
Why don't you guys introduce yourselves? Because I told my friends that you guys are ceramics artists, but maybe say where you're from and what you specialize in.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. My name is Nate Hunter. I'm a ceramic artist in Wisconsin, and I specialize in wood-fired work mostly, and I'm branching out into some new work using Kintsugi and
nice.
gold leaf and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yay. I'm Trent Freeman. I am in Kansas City, Kansas, on the Kansas side. And we always have to get that clear.
You always have to delineate that.
I know. You got to tell. You got to say which one it is. And I do mixed media sculpture, and 90% of my work is in clay. And I do a lot of, this works out really nice because a lot of my work is construction of things and piecing things together. So I was kind of excited about this whole idea of what's going on because I've done a lot of work in this kind of area a little bit. So this is going to be fun.
Yay! Well, I asked you guys to come on live with me because I just released the song Mended, and the chorus is about Kintsugi. Like the whole song is based on that Kintsugi imagery and communion imagery. So the cracked ceramics being repaired with gold, and then that Jesus is our healer, the one that comes and mends us and makes us whole, and that process. So, Kate just said, "Who's the hot guy with the trash?" Your wife's getting fresh on the chat.
I was like, Kate, my wife.
So why don't you guys talk a little bit about what exactly Kintsugi is? I know before we went live, Nate was talking a little about what causes pottery to crack in the kiln or explode. So, Nate, do you want to? Well, now that we're live, you can share with everyone. What causes?
Honestly, Kintsugi is more about it happens more with pottery that has already come out of the kiln. It's been used and then it gets dropped. It actually is it's Japanese in origin, where they use lacquer and gold leaf or gold powder to mend the pieces that are broken. And it comes a lot from like Zen Buddhism, actually. But I love the imagery and the way that God mends things and repairs things and makes things new. And it, so I have this piece right here, actually, that I'm going to be doing Kintsugi on. And this one fell off my shelf the other day. I'm sorry, it's hard to see. But this is a little noodle bowl. So what you do is you clean up the edges, and then you use the traditional method is to use lacquer, natural-based lacquer, and then you, over like 4-day period, you build up layers of lacquer, and then you stick the pieces together, and and then it's dusted with gold leaf. And so, do you have anything else to add, Trent? Just the basics?
No, I was kind of enjoying it because now the one thing
this is mine.
And I have a piece, but I have never traditionally done it before.
It takes forever.
I know, and I was so excited to hear that you were going to be doing them. I was like, oh, yay! I'm going to Wisconsin. And it's the same. I mean, the Buddhist philosophy on that, which it's very interesting that cross reference into Christianity, where we can kind of take it from, because I think that the one thing is that I enjoy about the idea is because when something breaks, when something breaks, that's what when they're putting that back together, that whole philosophical meaning of that breaking of that piece tells a story, where that pot has been and what that pot has been through to do this, and then to be mended and repaired.
Right.
And yeah, and I just, how we can cross reference that, I think is very into Christianity is very interesting. Ourselves before Christianity, and then that mending that takes place, that brokenness that happens, well, that's part of your story, that's where and why and who we are and where we came from and those kind of things. And I find that very interesting, then piecing those back together with that gold, because I totally dig that whole idea, of where and how that comes from. So it's interesting, that cross reference from Buddhism into how we can take that and place that is, I kind of dig that. So
yeah, I think the biggest difference is that in Buddhism it's all about enjoying the present and knowing right now, and objects have importance. But where it differs with Christianity is that we have a purpose beyond,
right?
And we were designed for that purpose.
Right.
Like I see this bowl here. This is a yakisoba bowl. This is made for putting noodles and food in, right? But it can't fulfill that purpose right now because it's been broken. We live in a fallen world. We don't live in a world of perfection. We live in a world that has evil in it, that has sin in it. But by repairing this piece, it brings its purpose back. It becomes whole again. It has new meaning, even, because I mean, honestly, this piece here is going to cost way more than the same bowl that wasn't broken, because this already has more information and meaning than the ones that are over there that are in one piece.
Right. So yeah, isn't it brilliant? That's quite brilliant. Yeah. I mean, that whole thing, and it lends so well to that, to where we are as Christians. And I totally.
It's all about God's redemptive purpose, right? Like the whole point of creation and of our lives right now is to bring that kingdom back on earth as it was in the garden, right? And so, like, that's his whole plan. That's why they call it his story. It's his story of redemption for all of humanity. And and it's funny, as potters, I always I personify the pots. Like I see them as little people, little and I totally understand what God how God sees us, as it's really intimate. You're sitting on the potter's wheel and you've got this thing in your hands and just a little bit of water, and you're moving the clay, and you get really attached to it. And it's it's one of the things that I actually have to break my students of, is that attachment of the little the little paperweights that they make that are this thick, and they're ugly, and they're and I keep saying that you don't have to keep any of that. Keep the knowledge, but don't keep the object, because it's permanent. This will last. Like, some ways we know about cultures is by their pottery. That's it. But the one thing we have is their fingerprint. The fingerprints stay on the clay. You can find fingerprints on pottery back 6,000 years ago. Like, it's amazing. And so that permanence matters, and that we are designed, and it's just, we're designed for the purpose, and we need to fulfill that purpose.
Yeah, exactly. I just had this whole conversation with some people about the nuance of a cup. We were discussing cups, and I'm like, you have to understand that your hands, we've gotten such into the as I refer to it, the Walmart mentality. These things that are produced by machines over and over and over again, and they look the same, and yet when somebody looks at that, it's just, okay, it's that utilitarian piece that is, whatever. But the one thing about it, I say, set your handmade coffee cups out, set your handmade tea cups out, and you watch every person gravitate to the handmade ones first. And then when they're making them, when we were discussing making these things, it was that same thing. Your hands have touched these. They've been involved with it. So every mark you put on there is going to stay. And we should celebrate that idea of our hands being involved in that creative process.
Right.
And it I can't believe how it floors people now. Of that, it's like, oh, my finger, doinked it or nicked it, and I'm like, yeah, it did. That's the cool part about it, and yet, and that same, as well as that same thing, when they start to get that involved in that thing, and they're starting to learn a little bit, any little thing they start to do, it's a mess, and I'm like, okay. We don't have to put that in the kiln,
No.
But great experience.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I'm totally with you. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and like this is one of my mugs here, and this was fired on its side in a wood kiln, and I leave these marks.
Yeah.
On purpose. So
cool. Yeah.
Because that's it. It's the mark that makes it interesting. Yeah. It's the mark that shows its story. If you have the eye, you can see, exactly where this was in the kiln. You know where it was, how far away from the fire it was.
Oh yeah.
All kinds of information just by looking at this pot. But it takes that discovery to look deeper into what it is.
Yeah.
And so, and Kintsugi is a very similar in its aesthetic. It's that extra story, that extra, the preparing to give it a new purpose, a new meaning. Even it's been made whole again. I love it.
Yeah, and doing it with gold is fantastic.
I talk to people all the time who have things they're embarrassed about in their past, or brokenness, wounding, and it's part of their story. That those cracks and broken pieces are part of their story.
Yeah.
But it's not the end of their story, because in the hands of God, an expert who knows how to put things back together, he can take fractured pieces that we're ashamed of and that we want to hide, and he makes them stronger and more valuable and more beautiful in the way that he touches and puts us back together.
And he makes them stick out.
Yeah.
He brings purpose to it. He says, no, this was me. This is my hand on it. Right. This is, you did that happen to you, and it was bad, but I've made it better. And it's his little thumbprint, on the clay, and it changes everything.
And it stands out. The standing out part is the important part. It's in gold. It's in gold. That part is standing out. There's no hiding it. There's no trying to cover it up and make it look like it wasn't broken. It's there it is. Here it is. And look how much I've done and how I beautified that piece. And yeah.
So I don't know if I've told you guys the story of how I wrote this song. So I've been familiar with Kintsugi for a long time. Just, it's always been inspiring. It's something I admire. I love potters. I'll go just, like, hang out and watch them work. It's that, like, some people like to watch painters paint. I like to watch potters create. So I've been familiar with the imagery for a while. So over the summer, it's been a hard year. A lot has happened.
Yeah.
In the United States specifically, over the summer, I was on Facebook and I was scrolling through my feed and checking my messages, and I was getting private messages with updates from people telling me that their world is on fire. Like, literally cities are on fire, riots were happening, and
Yeah, I was like, you're pretty close to that.
I live a half a mile from where Kenosha was on fire.
I know.
so
Yeah, I could smell it.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah,
crazy. I mean, I like we've been around wildfires in the mountains, but never something that was started with malicious intent and aggression in mind. And this, so I'm getting these messages and I'm praying for my friends who are, it's not just I'm watching the news and seeing this happen. These are my friends and my people who are in the middle of this. This is their reality. And so I'm sitting right here at my desk in my office, and I'm praying for people who are just sending me messages saying, please pray. Please pray. This is happening. Pray. So I'm praying, and my heart is breaking because people are so angry and so misunderstood. And there's all of this division and polarization, and everyone's against each other. And we've all been in lockdown and isolation and separated from one another for so many months. And we finally come out of hiding and we're angry. And so as I was praying, I had just read this Ravi Zacharias quote where he's talking about communion and Jesus coming and giving his body and his blood, and by his stripes we're healed. And when we take communion, we participate in that that daily renewal of being made whole again. And then I saw this Kintsugi pottery in my head as I'm praying, and I just start crying out and asking the Lord to mend our relationships, mend our country, mend our hearts that are so angry and sad and frustrated and hurt. And so I just saw, gold going through relationships in our country and bringing people back together, bringing our country back together, bringing people back together as the Lord comes and heals us. So that's where I started, like the bridge where it talks about a piece for you and a piece for me. That's like a piece of Christ. And then the peace of Christ, peace for you and peace for me. Our pieces will be held back together with a piece of him.
Right.
So that's where the song came from. And then it turned into a whole lot more as we just started singing it. Like I brought the idea and the framework to my co-writers in Greenville. And when we first started talking about it, my friend Jeff got on the keyboard and started playing this chord progression. And Joe said, "Oh, that sounds like Spider-Man when Uncle Ben dies." Like it was just, it was just like on the keyboard playing because I'm talking, like I'm sharing my heart of intercession for America. Playing.
There's always that one guy. There's always that one guy in the group. It's like.
So and I'm all there. I'm like, yes, I love the feels. This is exactly how I feel. And Joe said, maybe we need to add some hope to this so that it's not just like Uncle Ben dying. And so we changed it up a little bit, but it started there. Like the process of getting the song to where it is was like, it was painful. Mm-hmm. And so then as I've shared the song with people and heard feedback even before we recorded it, people were sharing testimonies of like struggling with infertility and God ministering to them through this and battling, children who've left and, turned away from them and parents who've passed away and just feeling the depths of grief and sadness that this year has brought, and then being mended in that. And I love that even like Jesus, when he came back from the cross, he didn't hide his scars. He could absolutely come back without his scars.
Right.
He kept them. And Nate, that's what I love about the piece that you're working on right now, that you're celebrating the scars.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah.
So this is actually some of my new work. This is a ceramic canvas that I'm playing with, doing some like wall hanging stuff. And so I cast this. This is cast ceramic, and then while it was still wet, I have made some scars in here. But actually, during the firing, I don't know if you can see in the back here. It actually got a big crack. I fired this in the chimney, underneath the chimney, and so it cools really quickly. But it gets this crazy salmon color, which I've never seen before come out of a wood kiln. I don't know if you can see that. I'm trying to get the angle.
Oh yeah.
But normally it comes out like this is the same clay out of inside the kiln.
Oh.
See, and it's just like it's browns and oranges. It's beautiful, but then you get this salmon color, which I thought was wild. But in the process of firing, it got that crack. And I had already meant this piece to be scarred, but then it like had its own, it had other stuff going on too.
Right.
Like I put fingerprints in to make it like a 3-dimensional a little bit, just to like throw your eye. Because when it's hanging on the wall, you're like, oh, that's an interesting painting. And then you get closer, you're like, there's fingerprints in it.
Right.
Why is that fingerprints? And then, so I started like thinking about this scar and how it intersects with this other scar. This is the scar that I did on purpose. This is the scar that happened by accident. And I saw this intersection as interesting as a play on, some things we do to ourselves and some things happen to us,
Mm-hmm.
But then this intersection here then explodes into just this patch of gold. And I'm going to actually add more. I think I need to build this out a little bit more. I didn't want to cover up too much of this beautiful color here, but
don't do that. I love that. It's like a, because it comes from that crack up in that corner, and it's like a poof of gold, kind of just as it runs through there. Sometimes when Nate and I talk with each other about stuff, sometimes it floors me that I've like, we come at things from the same kind of perspective a lot of times, and I'm like, it blows my mind sometimes. I'm like, oh, there's somebody else to discuss something with, and I'm like, oh, this is totally cool. When some of the things here, let me grab some of these things here. Okay, so I do construction pieces. Sorry, here. I do construction pieces on things. So when I'm building things, I purposefully construct pieces. Now, but I also go at it with the let's see what happens when I'm using the clay aspect of it. Because then what I do is I take that and then I add to it, not necessarily with gold filling cracks, but sometimes I take pieces and I will re-anchor them together using like copper or, weld steel, bolts through things. I just did a piece like that. And then, so I've got some of these let me see here, some of these pieces. Now, this is really funny. What these are pieces that I have pulled out of my pug mill that I let I let them dry kind of in there, and I just it mixes clay and then squeezes it out so you can kind of reuse it. So it's like a clay mixer, and it's got these blades in there that turn and they chop it up and everything like that. Well, the best way to clean it, or mine, because I've got this great big huge old Walker pug mill, and it's the best way to clean this thing is let some of the pieces dry and just kind of chunk them out of there. Well, when it does dry, you have got these pieces of clay that have been just crushed and moved and turned, and then they dry, and I pull them out and I can't help to keep them because it's a random happening of what happens. And so like this piece of clay, these are where the blades have ran through the wet clay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I take all of these, and I've got tons of these pieces, and then I'm going to just start assembling these pieces with different material, not necessarily gold, wowee, but whatever I'm going to stick them together with. And a lot of times, I mean, I'll mix up cement and I'll color it and things like that, and then I'll push them together like you would tile, and I'll stack these up. And how they stack up and become arranged, they become something totally different than scrap clay left in a pug mill. Right. And then I will stack them, and then I will reattach them into a piece of sculpture. So as opposed to these random broken pieces that by happenstance just became, I always look at them and go, oh, look how cool this is. It's just, and you take it and you turn it a different way, and then you begin assembling them and putting them together and using, I use lots of wood and things like that. So then they just, polish the wood and everything like that. And then I start arranging them in these things. And then it becomes, this broken mess that has now turned into this fantastic piece of sculpture. Mm-hmm. And I'll etch things in them and drill through them and fill those things with different pieces. And I always I've got one Bible verse, not the verse, but the address that I put on all my stuff. I don't tell anybody what it is. I hide it. I don't tell anybody where it's at. But it's there. And a lot of my stuff has lots of things going on in kind of this nice constructed piece. But if you look and you keep looking, you'll find something. And I always think to myself, somebody's going to find that. Somebody's going to see that and wonder what that is. And they're going to have to look it up. And then they're going to have to look it up. And then maybe that'll, and who knows when that will be or whenever. But I just finished a piece and I couldn't believe they found it just like that. The person I did it for was like, oh, what's that? And I go, well, that's for you to find out. I mean, I couldn't even believe it. Like, are you kidding me? I was like, I even forgot where I put it. It's right there. And I was like, oh my gosh. But those kind of things. So that's like when your song, Cherie, that now I'd heard it, several times before and never I didn't know where it came from. I mean, your conversation at the beginning, I got, but I never knew that's quite where you were going with repairing the pottery. When I would hear that, just in that being mended, I was like, oh, in my mind, I was like, oh, that's lovely. I mean, I get it. I understand that. But then when you said where that come from, I was like, oh, actually, it's quite brilliant. So I was like, that's crazy how that all works together like that. I was like, oh, right. That's really good. So that's a fantastic song in the idea, because it got me to thinking exactly what you were saying, exactly about putting these things together. And then Nathaniel doing that, I was like, oh my gosh, how fun is this? I was like, yeah, and being able to see that. And just one question. Do you think because of the rapid cooling, that's where you got that color from?
Probably. But it's also, it was in the chamber behind a salt kiln and a wood kiln. Oh. So and it's a rounded chimney base, which is strange, but it like swirls as it goes up. Who knows? It could be anything, but it could be silicon carbide. That was my best guess coming off the shelves. But we're talking nerdy ceramic stuff now. Yeah, she's like, oh, okay. I was getting ready to say,
I was like, you need to put something else kind of in there and just see where, kind of placement and
just that's my new favorite spot, because nobody else likes that spot. But that's
and I've never seen that color show up out of a wood kiln before. So
I know neither. Yeah, it was wild. Yeah, yeah. The funny thing that keeps coming back to me is that the scars are what make things more interesting. It's like when you sit around long enough drinking with friends, it inevitably comes up to, what kind of scars you got. Like, tell us some stories. Tell us your purpose. Like, I have this. You probably won't even be able to see it, but I've got these two marks right here and right here.
Yeah.
I was 8 years old, and I was running from some bullies, and I took a shortcut through the woods, tripped over a root, and landed square on a glass bottle neck that had cracked in half. Cut me all the way down to the bone, and I walked out of the woods, and I was just like, it was bleeding everywhere. I'd never seen so much blood. I've never seen so much blood since then. And it just so happened that actually the nanny of one of the kids that was chasing me had just been to the laundromat down the street, saw me walking on a road that didn't have a sidewalk, saw me walking on the road, and like pulled over, and she wrapped my hands in towels and then drove me to my parents' house. But it's like that whole story is just one of those stories of redemption. And if one thing would have changed, one little nuance would have changed, I would have died. I would have bled out because I cut the arteries, and it was bad. But now I can tell the story. Right. And now it's something different. That hurt like heck. I had 21 stitches, and the doctor kept saying, "Oh, only one more stitch," and then 21 stitches, because he had to stitch together the underneath and on top, and then I had to go back and get them removed. It's like, it's grueling, and it's awful, and it's scary, and it's nasty, and I cut myself last week in the studio, and I've got stitches here now. It's another story, right? But it's like, we like those stories, though. We like hearing that stuff. It's what's interesting, what makes us interesting. If you talk to somebody, "Oh, I don't have any scars," well, then what have you done with your life?
Right.
Like, you don't have a scar at all? Like, that's weird. Like, you should have some, and chicks dig scars. I'm
covered with them. Kate said we don't have time for all Trent's scar stories.
Yeah, that's a whole story. That's a whole show in itself. And I
have a bully scar.
Yeah.
And I won't tell. Well, yeah. Mine was not 27 stitches. It's right here. Well, I'll tell it real quick. I was on the playground. I was a preschooler at like a pre-K, and there were and I barely remember this. But what I do remember is they held my head down at the bottom of the slide. It was an old metal slide in the 80s. And so they had my head held down, and I looked up the slide to see, like, what are they doing? And then they rolled a tire down the slide over my face, and I slid on the metal slide, and it sliced up my chin. And those are my first stitches. And I still have no idea why those kids did that. Like, I was so oblivious. I thought everyone loves me. Why would they do that?
Right. Yeah.
I have got so many stupid scars. The one thing about those is and I say stupid scars because a lot of them came from my own ignorance. It's like, I'm pretty sure I can jump off that.
Some of them happen to you, and some of them you do to yourself.
Right. Some are on purpose, and some are on accident.
Gosh, I just don't even know. I've got some from other people. I have some from myself. I've got enough crazy ones and large ones and broken things that I sometimes go. I look back at those and go, wow, I can't believe I made it this far. I just, I was like, seriously and honestly, there are a lot of times now that, after becoming a Christian, you look back and ponder all of those things and go, wow, there really must be a point. There really must be a point of this stuff and my healing and my mending of all those things leading up to it's pretty crazy. I always get, speaking of philosophical, I always, in getting deep and stuff, I have to do that a lot and wonder why, and then go, and now I know, and being able to walk with God and doing those things and seeing those things, and then taking and realizing how important those scars were because of story,
Right.
So and that's the same.
That's part of the reason why I make pods.
Right.
Because it's a function.
Yep.
We all have a function. We all have a purpose. And that, just the story of that, running through stuff and having all these scars, that's our story. But it's still, it doesn't affect our function. If it affects our function, then we have to use Kintsugi to put it back together again.
Right.
Sorry.
And we're never beyond repair. Never.
Right.
Like with Jesus, we're never beyond repair. No one is beyond being mended.
Right.
And I have to believe our culture is not beyond being mended.
No, absolutely not. No.
And our country is not beyond repair. Right. And so, I'm praying.
Yeah, I mean, you look back at a lot of major, when there were major catastrophes.
Right.
The church, and there are revivals. There are church plants. There are people coming to know the Lord in record numbers that had sworn against it. It's like, it's those moments when you realize your mortality, when you realize that you are not all that. Like, you realize that you are not as cool or as big as you think you are. Mm-hmm. That's when it like brings you to a point of contemplation where you go, what else is there's got to be something else. There's got to be something more. And I feel like after this year, and I knew it was going to happen. I had a feeling that something was about to come down, because we were getting really like haughty, and we were getting really proud of ourselves, and it always happens. You study history long enough and you realize that the decadence doesn't last. It's a very short, it peaks, and then boom, something happens to knock it back down. I felt the same thing right before 9/11. I felt like we were at that point now. People had been not thinking about God. There was everybody was talking about how God was dead and how the church was faltering, and all the televangelists were all having issues and all that stuff. And then 9/11 hits. And then what happened? There were major like revivals all over the country, and it happens in direct response to people realizing that they are vulnerable, that they are not in charge of their own destiny, that they do not have control, that they thought they had. And our Western culture has this sense of, oh, I can just go to the store and get food. I'm in charge of my own destiny. I can become whoever I want to be, and then something like this happens, and we all go, whoa, what the heck is going on? And then, we have to face it. We can't ignore it any longer. It's our mortality. It's our humanity. It's our sin. It always comes right back to our face, and we have to deal with it. And so I really do feel like we're right on the cusp of something major.
Well, I do too. I do too. And I think the only thing that getting into prayer, I think, is really important. But this is, I found this is one of those things where when so much gets out of your control personally, out of your hands, where you're like, I don't know, I got no idea. That leaning in on God, that just, we're just going to lean in. We're going to lean in hard with God, because I see a lot of people who are leaning in hard, but also I see a lot who are not. They're not. It's the actual opposite. And you're right, Nate. I mean, the whole idea of God will allow chaos to ensue. I mean, whether he creates it or what, but he'll allow that chaos to ensue, just to, and I think that's important for us to remember that and go, okay, where are we going to put our trust and where are we going to put our faith? Right. And what are we going to do? And the unfortunate part is,
have you considered my servant Job? That's the one I always remember. Have you considered my son Job, my servant Job? Like, he's somebody you should probably pick on. Like, I'm going to show my glory. Yeah. I'm going to give him tenfold what he had, 100-fold what he had before.
I know. You have to keep
redemptive purpose.
Yeah. You have to keep thinking that. Otherwise, I mean, it's very easy to regress if you don't keep those kind of things in mind, because it sometimes you start going, wow. I mean, what? This is a whole lot to take in, and you have to, get calm and back up just a little bit and go, okay, I mean everything. I mean, Daniel. I mean, look at everybody who had to deal with it, and that's that's the part that ticks me off sometimes. Is like, I don't want to deal with it. I'm being a good guy here.
And I just go to church and go to heaven.
I'm leaning in, God. I'm leaning in. And the thing is but the reality is you go, okay, wait a second. Let's continue in prayer and let's get into this. And there has been with Kate and I, there's been a real peace that's come about us because of that leaning in. And honestly, I kind of leaned in pretty hard on my creating of things, because I get that, I get a sense of peace and I get a sense of connection with God when I'm doing that, because I continue conversations in my head with him as far as why am I doing it? What am I for? How's my craftsmanship? All of these kind of things, I mean, just, before it was me handling all that stuff. And being Christian, that working to that point is that realization of that it's not you. It's you doing it, but who are you doing it for and why, and to what glory is that going to happen? And that goes to my head a lot, all the time.
Yeah.
So but it's nice.
Myself here.
Well, you know what? It's nice to have this camaraderie because of that. I mean, and I think we talked about this before, Nate. I had no peer group. There was no peers in this situation where I could have those philosophical conversations about God and me creating and where it's coming from and why and those kind of things. And then I'm like, oh wow, there's another dude. And I was like, and he's doing the same thing. He's putting stuff back together. And I'm like, hey, this is what I do. And I was like, man, this is, and somebody to talk shop with.
Right. Yeah. We can get nerdy. We can get real nerdy real fast.
I know. My intern yesterday, we're doing glazes, and I was discussing glaze calculation with her and some things about that. And I'm like, okay, don't glaze over. It's about to get real deep here all of a sudden. Right. And I'm like, but she did, so she's all for it. So, but yeah. You just can't you can't have conversations like that with students because they go like this. What?
Don't glaze over. That's, you get the work. So, we've been chatting for like 45 minutes. We should probably wrap it up. But I love that you guys were just talking about how the community and leaning into the Lord is how you process through some of those difficult things. So like we're ending 2020, which for many has been the hardest year they've ever known. It still blows my mind that they're like, I'm old enough now that I have friends who didn't live through 9/11. I know, right? So for a lot of people, this is the hardest thing they've ever done.
Right.
And even people who've been through 9/11. I mean, this is like a global impact. 9/11 was most of our country. I mean, it had a global impact, but this pandemic has affected the entire world. And so for our whole generation of people who are like alive in this moment, in this year, this is the hardest thing that a lot of us have ever done. And 2020 is about to end, but it would mean that this is over. But as we're coming out of it, as we're processing through, what I've found in my handful of decades on the planet, that the pruning never ends. And the pruning, like the process of pruning, doesn't get less painful. That, like,
if anything, it's worse.
when God cuts something off, like for me in my 40s, when God cuts something off, it still hurts as much as when he cut something off in my 20s. What changed is the trust that I experience, knowing there's a purpose in this. And so when you're asking me to let go of something, when you're taking something away,
Right.
where you're asking me to do something that I don't want to do, the trust is there so that it's easier to surrender to being mended, so that I don't resist that and just say, I'm broken, I give up.
Right.
Or it's never going to look the same again. It's not going to work the way it did before. Like
Right.
that bowl that you keep holding up, it's not going to work the way it did before.
Yeah, not really.
But to trust the hands of the potter who can put it back together and repurpose it into something that's more beautiful than it was before. So for us, as we're closing out the hardest year of our lives and transitioning into like what's next, to trust the one who's pruning us and trust the one who's putting us back together and trust the process of being mended. Just like Nate, all your pieces that take on a personality when you're putting them together, like if they had souls, they would trust you because you're a master at what you do. So let's just trust the Lord together as we surrender and let him do what he knows how to do best.
Oh yeah.
Right. I think that's so important to do every day. even when things are going good.
Yeah.
It's important to remember. The thing that I just keep going back to is just it's God's redemptive history, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's on a mission. He's got a plan.
Yeah.
Right.
We already know how it ends. So I read the book, right? It's like I know how it ends. However we get there, like spoiler alert, God comes back, God's here, his son comes back and redeems the whole earth, it's like he puts the whole earth back together the way it's supposed to be, the way it was before sin, so it's, I have to always remember that when I blow out a tire in my car, or I'm yelling at the kids for doing something. It's like I remember there's a purpose. There's something going. There's something more than just right now. And I think that's what makes what we're talking about. I feel so much more important than just the traditional Japanese wabi sabi. The beauty in the imperfect.
Yeah.
That's what wabi sabi means. But that the Kintsugi is a part of that wabi sabi thought process.
Right.
That's so much more transient and so much more impermanent. Whereas what we're talking about is we see the end. We've got the goal, and we can move towards that goal. And we're going to grab some scars on the way, but that gives us something to talk about. It makes us more interesting, and it makes us who we are.
Yeah.
And so we're just enjoy the journey, knowing that it's a journey. It's not just wandering. And I feel like that's what makes Christianity so different than so many other religions in the world, is that there is a purpose. God has a promise. He has promised you that he will hold you tight. He will take care of you, even in the depths of the lion's den, even in the fiery furnace, even in the desert, even because Israel had to deal with some stuff, right? They had some sin issues they had to deal with, so they had to wander around for a while. Even in that time, they followed the pillar of fire and smoke, and they had a rock rolling behind them, giving them water. And their shoes never wore out. It's like, remember, there's a purpose. It's more that we are wandering, but it's because we have to get this worked out. And then, boom, promised land. Then, boom, you get the end, right? It's like, and that changes everything. It makes so much more. It makes life so much more worth living when you have that purpose. When you know that going into it.
Yeah, I do, and that's exactly. I always have to remind myself. I do all of those things that you said, and then I have to keep filtering in. It's not my way. It's not my way. I can plan it, but I have to keep removing the picture, because when things don't turn out the way I wanted them to turn out, that's right. I used to get really irritated by that. I mean, just like to me, it looked like it was all falling apart. And I kind of moved it into the idea of, okay, this didn't work out the way I thought it should, as opposed to me saying, oh, this didn't, this is not working out. It's like, okay, this didn't work out the way I thought it should, because sometimes those things happen. And I have so many times watched something better show up. Mm-hmm. And so I'm looking for that. I know he's not gonna leave me, and I know, oh, this looks like it sucks, but then I'm like, well, it didn't. It didn't. It doesn't in the end. It doesn't in the end for the rest of us, like you were saying. It doesn't in the end. We know the end,
right? So
we just have to know that those little nuances that look like there's a problem. We look at that crack and realize that's being mended a better way than we even anticipated, yep. and yeah, it's a good deal.
Yeah. This year has been a rough one for me. It started before even COVID started. Every month. So January, I lost my grandmother. February, I lost a friend. Then July, I lost another friend. It was like boom, 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 boom. There was so much going on just early on. But even in death, God can use the death to move hearts. Sure. Nothing is impossible for God. I feel like, so often we can be so focused on the hurt that we don't look at what it's actually doing.
Right.
Like, I got the scar here, that hurt, this is terrible. I can't throw on the wheel for 12 days because, it's my hand that's on the clay.
That makes centering a booger, doesn't it?
It really makes everything a booger. But it's like, you can focus on that. Yeah. Or you can focus on, no, this is a chance for me to contemplate what's going on. This is a chance for me to plan for the next year. I had a friend who broke his leg, and he said, I could have just sat down and made a bunch of models, but instead I decided I was going to spend the time in prayer and fasting. And he's leading a church now. It's like, he went from being a counselor at a college to leading a church, and because God used that time, that intensive time where he could have been down on himself and breaking his leg. He couldn't play basketball. He couldn't do any things he loved, but he just kept going.
Right.
he recognized the opportunity that God was giving him, even in the midst of the pain. He focused, and God blessed him for it. And that it's all about our perspective, right? And when you don't have perspective, you're lost,
right?
And what do we call people who don't know Jesus? They're lost. They're wandering around. They have no purpose. They might think they have a purpose, but that's not their purpose. We don't receive our purpose from ourselves. This doesn't say I want to be a vase. It doesn't. It's completely contrary to a vase. Why would you put a handle on a vase? Why is it so small? Why is it so opening so wide? This isn't a vase. Why do you want to be a vase? That's not your purpose. Oops.
Right.
A little over my keyboard.
Well, as we wrap up on that note, I just want to extend to everyone watching that there are a couple resources that I've provided for anyone who's in that place where they're processing through pain and wanting to surrender to let the Lord come in and do that healing work. That there are playlists on Spotify and Apple Music to go and follow and listen to, which are just some worship songs I've put together that are along that same vein of just like leaning into the Lord and letting him, like that peaceful, soaking, contemplative songs that really focus on setting the atmosphere for Jesus to come and heal us. And then on my website, there's the devotional companion for the song that's helpful in processing through some scripture passages and some questions to guide you through the process. So you can go to cherewright.com and follow the Spotify or Apple Music, and the playlists are there.
And everybody should go to that because that whole album, girl, is killer. I love that whole thing. I like the way you put it together. I like the way you recorded it. Nice.
Thanks.
Good production.
It's great.
Good
Absolutely.
stuff, sweetie.
Well, thank you guys for coming and talking and geeking out about clay things.
Right on.
So fun. I learned.
Thanks for letting us be here. This is fun.
Yeah, I definitely learned some new things, and you got me laughing and thinking, and I love both of those things. So you guys are awesome. Everyone who watched, thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Yep, you too. Bye.